District and School Board Curriculum Committee. It is 4:30 p.m. on December 2nd of 2025, and we will start with introductions. My name is Melanie Ergott, School Board Member.
June Kruger, School Board Member.
Kelly Lang, School Board Member.
Kelly Downs, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Tina Van Roo, District Data and Assessment Coordinator.
Erin Faust, Curriculum Coordinator.
All right, thank you, everyone. Our first discussion item today will be the review of the 300 policy series, which is instruction. And I believe Superintendent Wimmer will be presenting this today. Thank you.
So I will serve as your liaison from the Policy Committee, which is a couple other members that I help oversee. So we had foreshadowed this last year and talked about this kind of being the year for the 300 series review, and that is the intersection of instruction. Since you're the Curriculum and Instruction Committee, we wanted to kind of launch with that. And no, we are not going to go through all 75 policies line by line. That's what the Policy Committee does. So no envy there, but I would like to engage you in some dialogue, some reflection on some key pieces. We'll go through the different buckets in this series and then dig into a couple to kind of get you thinking about. But one thing that's very unique, I'm like, oh, I hate this one. There we go, is this doesn't just lie with the policy committee. So a lot of times policies, might be worked on administratively. They might go to a policy committee first, and then you'll see them as board members when they start coming up for readings. One thing that's different because of that intersection with your work is that it's coming to curriculum committee for discussion, and then we actually have a student team that will be formed around this. So we have 2 different leadership teams up at the high school that will be involved in reviewing. They really impact students, so having high school students who are impacted by these policies, thinking about them, sharing their actual real-world experience, as well as staff. So your counselors need to be part of this. They're executing on a lot of these policies and plans, so we'll actually have a staff engagement group and student groups. So once we launch, send me your feedback in an ongoing manner. We'll make sure and surface that. And then we'll cull all that feedback and we'll go through policy. And then we'll do some drafting and then kick that back to groups. So you'll see this again before it comes back for board readings. We would anticipate then kind of closing out our year before your next school year starts. So if there was something new we were putting in place, new requirements or changing requirements in any way, you start with a clean year. Or you might, because you'll see in some of these policies like this will start with 2024. This will start because you want to look for that gap in impact on students. So one thing I want to ground you in, because policy work isn't your committee per se, less is more with policy. We have statutes, we have all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of policies sitting here. I will actually call out the ones that are required. You'll see it's like 10. So that's not where you need things necessarily. You want to have process, procedures, different practices, different guides that help you with that work, but they don't necessarily need to sit in policy. So kind of keep that piece in the back of your mind. And then the parts of policy are the policy itself. And then you might have a supplementary piece, like an administrative rule that's an accompanying document. Those might change more often. Like right now, I'm in the process of updating some fee pieces that are going into administrative rule. Those we notice the board and update those. They're a little bit more flexible because you don't want anything that locks you into policy, and references something really specific. Sometimes we make a general reference, like we'll follow state statute on things, but you want to watch those kinds of language, and your policy committee will help you with that. So we can stay in that big ideas realm. But then in addition to administrative rules, there might be some exhibits, and those might be actual forms or things you fill in. So there's kind of different parts and pieces. So we'll keep us in those big ideas. Any question about kind of the unique process of this or the timeline or philosophy? Like I said, less is more on policy. The more you have, the more you're in violation of it. You can write too many rules and you can get too far away. I think many of you were with us when we inherited some policies that were from my birthday. So I knew that they were well over 50 years old when I came here. But we're up to date. So I'm going to go through those buckets right now. 310 is around your instructional goals. There is nothing required in this section at all, and you can see in these policies, it has just a list of our mission and some fundamental values. It has some vague language around performance objectives. So my wonderings about those specifically are, if you want a foundational piece that sets you up around what are our instructional goals, I would be talking more about what a profile of a graduate looks like, what I expect that kids in our instructional program gain from having access to that, maybe reimagining some of the things that you see there. I feel like just a list of our mission and things of that nature without any context or how that's used is a bit unusual. So those were kind of my observations and kind of looking at and living. There's nothing bad. You know, it's great to have those things codified in some manner. But I'd just be looking for context. So I don't know what your thoughts and feelings are around that, around nesting that in policy. Do you want to see that more in strategic planning? What kind of thoughts do you have, your kind of gut reaction on those things?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of a strange place. It's not a policy. It's a way of being rather than a policy with the mission statement and values.
Yeah, and what you can do sometimes is you can talk about the importance of those things. You can talk about maintaining those. You can talk about a cycle of revising those or making sure you're in attention to them in a strategic plan without putting the actual words. Or, like I said, here's what it is right now, and we're going to review it on this 3-year cycle in this manner. That's fine too. But when I looked at those, it just felt vague to me as someone who's using it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that these are, we do have our mission, vision, and core values, but I would think that those could be in the handbook, on the website, in places that are more prominent, and we just live them daily, not tucked away in a policy.
Yeah, no one's shopping in policy for that language, right, of who you are as a district. They're not coming here first. So we'll kind of take that and talk through, and what does that look like to make those things come alive in a different way, possibly with those other groups. One piece is being grounded in academic standards. So recall that we subscribe to WASB's policy series, so they provide all the legal templates and guidance. This is up-to-date language, and I would recommend, while it's not required, that you still have some foundation about your academic standards. Recall that we need to provide notice of our academic standards preceding the school year. We need to have something that's anchoring us, so oftentimes we use and go off the Wisconsin state standards. They have nice open periods when they're developing or revising standards for general public to weigh in, and then we still have local control in what and how we adopt in those. So, and I think that's something for who we are as a district, that it's important to stay grounded and show people, like, no, we have a foundation. Our team can't just make up things. We have to stay grounded in something around those, because that's what we want to be, is really transparent about what's going on in our classrooms. Those are the ones over big, overarching goals. Any other feedback as you think about kind of putting that bucket together?
I think it makes the most sense to have that all in one piece rather than 3 separate.
Okay.
I think that I'm fully in support of that.
It's like we get to start with the small ones, just wait for the ones that take up multiple slides. And this is simply the list of policies right from our website, so anyone has full access to those. So then there's some general organizational plans. So this is just saying that you, as a board, are going to authorize a school calendar every year, and then also that we fly our flag. It talks about exposure to the Pledge of Allegiance, national anthem, and then the only change that we've done is we fly the POW flag on the observation day. So we might want to update that to show that. And those are just, to me, those don't really rest with this committee. You can have an opinion on them, but they're not about the core function of instruction. So if you don't have any opinions on those right now, I'm good to move on. Here's where your meat sits, right? So you have done a ton of work as the department in putting together and refining a curriculum cycle and understanding what occurs in those. And then what you really want is to make sure your policy keeps you grounded in that and in attention so that there's accountability and we're doing that. So I wouldn't recommend that you take those documents and you say, yes, that's now the policy, right? That doesn't give you flexibility. You want a team that's going to bring you a process and they're going through like, here's our anticipated goals for the year, and you're looking at and reviewing and digging in. But you want to go through these and say, okay, and they need to be updated, but around, does that attend to continuous improvement? Does it attend to our intent that we now have a solid process and it shouldn't matter if any one of us leaves, that the district has a process for how they go about developing that? We have a commitment to engagement with our staff. You don't want, different people to come in and all of a sudden like, nope, we're just gonna, go sit in a room and do this. That's what you want nested in this series, is how do we go about, what's our expectation? And for me, it's around process. There's checkpoints of accountability, and that there's high engagement, and that it includes our staff, our general public, et cetera. So those are some pieces as we've built things that we've heard from you as board members, from our teams who are working on those things, as well as our community. So that's the other piece. You'll see the required one in this. I would redesign the experimental programs. That sounds like we're using children as guinea pigs. That is not how that would be labeled. But what they're talking about in that, when you read that policy, is talking about pilot programs. I can't call something a pilot and go try it on kids without having everyone aware of that. There was a process around that, and parents are okay with that. So that's kind of a protection piece around, I can't just sneak something in and say, well, it was a pilot, or I was just trying it out. Like, you got to use what we have unless we're authorizing some. And sometimes pilots make sense and sometimes they don't. But when you go through the curriculum process, they will determine that. They might get some materials in, try a lesson, try a unit as part of that. And sometimes you might see a school try a whole program and give some feedback on that. But that kind of puts that piece in place. I would flesh out a little bit in here. I don't see it intersecting here, but I'd lay in some language, or more thoughtfully lay out the cross-section of, if we have a staff member engaged in research, what that looks like and how that intersects, because they also can't engage in research. Like, I want to try a handwriting, I'm doing my master's and I'm going to do it on, developmental handwriting, and I want to try this and I want to use some of that data. It's our own curriculum, it's these pieces. Well, you can't do that without notifying, without getting a lot of approvals from the department level, from my level, that we would authorize that. So they can't do that kind of stuff. So that, to me, kind of falls into a research piece. And the words experimental were a little broad for me. So I'd more fully flesh out kind of what's a pilot, when are they used, and who authorizes that, and then when do we get to do some research, or when can, some data be used in a different way, and what consent looks like. The one that's up to date is around parent rights and district programs and activities. That's the most recent language, and that is required. And again, there's an intersection in multiple policies in here where, as parents, you are the ultimate decision maker for your child. If they want to step out of a lesson, they want to step out of a book, they want to step out of a topic, we most often think about it as human growth and development, but this is laying that out for people. To that point, they're not shopping for that in policy. We have clear guidelines around, like, here's how we're going to notify you when this is coming up. Here's how we're going to keep you informed about these things so that you know and can make a decision on those. And I think those are all really important pieces. I think that we'll get a little bit later, we'll come in kind of as we've vetted resources, that comes differently. This is around kind of what they've introduced as that curriculum cycle and all the steps we're going through around how we're in attention to cultivating curriculum. So So any big ideas or thoughts on that? This is not the first time we've talked about these things, so I know I'm kind of spitting back at you a lot of things that you've said to me in the past. You good? Here's your big ones for multiple slides. So again, the breakdown under the 340 part around educational programs, different types of programs. Okay, so in the 341s, you have your basic instructional program. We're only dealing with reading. So that was brought on by Act 20. You had some updates there. I would almost recommend either in the intro of that or something that's just a little bit more generalized language that gives an intro and doesn't, like, I look at this and if this is my entire series on an educational program, this isn't the only thing I teach and it's not the only thing I care about. I don't just care about reading. Especially Kelly, who's a math person, a little passionate. She'll be like, I need a math policy. But I think just a stronger opening around the commitment to the instructional program. We could maybe nest that in goals, map that back. But anything when you think about kind of that base instructional program come to mind for you? Do you want us to more clearly call out any other subjects or make a comprehensive one and have literacy sit beside it? Where would you like to see that?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is the reading program, like in the other series, you said some were required and some weren't. This reading program one was created before Act 20? Are you
Correct.
saying it's required and we should update it to include Act 20?
Nope.
Or-
We'll intersect. You have it all over the place. So this is one of those pieces where you're going to have parts and pieces, and the Act 21 is one. I think it takes effect 2026. It's got to, where one's going to die, one's going to pick up. Like, I think all that needs to be aligned and taken care of.
Maybe it's a chance to consolidate.
So when you think about the instructional program, what do you really want to call out? What do you really want in policy?
My initial thought is it's so broad because you have special ed programs, you have reading, you have electives. I don't know how we could incorporate all of the opportunities for K through 12, plus even college level. I mean, that's not even,
So they're broken down by category. So the first one, 341, is just your basic instructional program that's going to be available to all kids.
It just seems kind of weird that there's only reading on there and vehicle repair and then the district wells. Like it seems like there's a lot missing.
Right. There you go. See, you got there. Vehicle repair is literally just that you're going to sign off on liability so that if we fix your cars in our shop, that's a liability piece. Like you said, like when I look at that and I think about like, this is where I can tell the world about my instructional program, that's what I have, maybe needs some work. As you're seeing, like I'm calling out 3 different things. Like, where is that? And if you're going to talk about wellness, wellness is something that they dictated to us over a decade ago on that, and its sense has faded. And how does that get incorporated? I think the most exciting thing is as we transform to the new website and have the curriculum loaded in a manner that makes sense, like that's where your families and your public are going to go. What is it that you teach, and where do I find it? And that should be more true to its title around what is the basic instructional program, maybe highlighting some opportunities and where to find them and how that's communicated to you. You can put in your policy, so I have a whole supplementary list of these are things that I have to communicate annually. and how I have to communicate them. You know, so when you talk about your instructional program, maybe that's more, how do we promote that? How do we make people aware? You're gonna have that other statute, like, I have to communicate the standards. I have to communicate these. Maybe this is our commitment to what is our instructional program, and how do I know what that is? And what are the checks and balances on that? And sometimes you intersect on some other policies. But I like that you kind of like, it doesn't make sense. And it's okay to say it doesn't make sense, friends. The next piece is 342 basic, special, and alternative education programs. So there are some required components of this. You can see they're calling out specifically for students with disabilities, participating in title programs, EL learners. Those are required. You're also going to have a guide. There's an intersection there. These are not the only policies around a student with disabilities. They sit also a little bit in a 400 series, and then we adopt certain guidance documents and certain pieces that are supplementary to policy. So I don't need everything to say everything, but I do want to clean up some of those things. I think they're fine in those categories, but I think it's confusing in some of those, maybe some cross-references to some of my alt ed, some of my other policies. And again, our families who are experiencing service are getting that firsthand from us. We don't make them rely on going to a policy guide on some things, but I think we could clean up. They're all, I know that the department's gonna take a look at the gifted and talented program. Emily is looking at, which will come a little bit later, the counseling program. There's some different things under review here. But again, this is keeping us to that legal obligation and our understanding of that obligation to serve all kids. And that's what that's defining here. But I think we could tighten up some of those references. And the other piece is instructional arrangements. It gets at, when we were talking about some of those other opportunities, how can I be enrolled? And it gives guidance. This is where our counselors are going to be really helpful because they're living with this firsthand. When you look at part-time enrollment or different opportunities, people may or may not be aware that I can serve kids who are homeschooled, that are in other schools. They can come in and take certain classes, but then they might start saying, well, I want to take this class or that. There's all these different kind of protections of when you can take a class, when you need to be enrolled, when you can be part-time, when you can do this. Those are really driven by some statutes and some pieces. So I would foresee that team coming up. And again, every time someone asks a question, we use policy as a reference for that, where we go in and say, no, it says this, and here's how I can do that. You want to stay within the statute in the law. On that, you don't want to expand it any bigger, make it any smaller. You want to be in that just right. We see that most when they're maybe coming to participate at the high school level for trying to access a high-level math class, science class, something of that nature that aren't offered in other places. And then the other piece, the class size is, again, another logistical piece that gives you exactly the leeway that we need, where I'm not saying something in stone, but it gives, it's deferring authority to me. We have some of the lowest class sizes in the county, which we like to keep in those ways, smaller for smaller kids. They get a little bit bigger as kids grow. But then there's an important thing around how we review classes and when we close them out. So that's anything that's under 18 has to be run through a team, and you may or may not be aware process at, especially important for electives up at the high school. They put in their choices January, February, and they start building out schedules, and then we will look at and go through. They have a big scheduling team at the high school, and they will go through with departments then and problem solve. And then they'll come up to, it'll be Kelly will participate for her first spring this year, Tim Harder from the CTE end, Lenny, Sarah, myself, and we'll go through and say where some things are at risk of not running, what's the pathway for a student. And as board members, you've seen that come to fruition. There's some things we might have condensed and said, okay, our pathway now is to skip do this as a semester and then go right to Moraine Park and do this to protect a pathway for a student and keep that robust. The art team is really good at that, where they look at and make that policy come to life, because we'll say, all right, you're under in this, you have these two things, do you want to teach, clay hand building and wheel throwing in the same section and do this? And they're like, yep, and we'll do advanced drawing plus that, like they'll kind of commingle to make things happen. So we lean on that, but that's what that looks like, and your language gives us the flexibility to protect opportunities for kids. You can also see in the course guide that you just had where we're looking ahead at the enrollment, and you saw some classes, now I'm gonna start offering these on odd or even years, right? So I get the opportunity in my high school career to take it, but I'm gonna restrict that a little bit to drive kids at certain times for that choice so I can fill up those sections. So we're being very thoughtful and forward planning. And like I said, you've seen this come to life on the back end in some different ways. Adult education, we do not offer. So I just made sure that you saw what 344 was, but it's not in use, nor would we recommend putting it in use. I think this is one of the biggest pieces you're going to have to put some thought to as board members around academic achievement. Who gets to wear a cord? Who gets to be the valedictorian? How's my grade point done? Do I have weighted grades? Do I not? All of these are really big, high-stakes conversations for kids and for the board. I think we've all received emails in the past around, hey, my student is excelling at this, but they didn't take an AP class. So now you're boxing them out of this. That's because that's what our policy says currently. This is really something you want to dig in and formulate opinions on. I don't know if you have any that you want to express right now on this, because I know we've had some correspondence on this one, but any thoughts that you would have?
I don't know, I mean, this is probably not the time for this, but just something, these are almost recognized too late sometimes. So how do you get in front of these to get this in someone's head in their freshman year rather than going into their senior year where it's too late for that? So I think it's really important. I like the guidelines. I like that there are qualifications for it because I think it is fair across the board. But it's something that you have to introduce very early on. So how do you put that as an important thing to a lot of people?
Then to me, that's a course guide update. That should be in there, so stated.
And linking back to this.
Graduation requirements. This is something we talked about in policy before. We have minimal graduation requirements here. You should look at that. To say that I do the minimum of what the state allows, is that who we are? I don't know that that's who we are. You also deal with, when you have a smaller set of graduation requirements, you start having to navigate release options for juniors and seniors. So I have more kids off campus than on, and then they're just naturally not taking opportunities. So there's different things to look at there and explore. And that's something we had called out earlier in policy to kind of kick over that rock. I'll be very interested what student perception is on that and how they want to participate kind of more fully in their high school experience on those things. As well as, you saw it when we did the high schools update. We don't have a cap on our valedictorian and salutatorian. We don't have, which is fine by me. But there's certain things too around when is something factored into different grade points, when are things not factored in, how are, a lot of kids will ask us about weighted grades. I get that question a lot, because in some systems, if I take an AP class, it's worth more points. You ever hear of kids who graduate with a 5.0 in something and those things, and it's like, what does that mean or what does it not mean? So it's very interesting in this, especially when you look at, we're going to have to do some work around class rank and those pieces. It's very interesting to actually talk with admissions advisors, and they actually go less on any of these variables, and they go more on they know us. They know who you are, and saying I have a 4.0 from here or a 5.0 from here, but a 4.0 from us because I don't have weighted grades, they know that's not comparable. They know those things about systems. They're looking at kids in totality for admissions and those kinds of things. So it's very interesting of what those mean and what they don't mean in systems. And I think sometimes we place a lot of worry on that next step in their academic career, whether it's going on to a 4-year or 2-year kind of world of work. What do those even really mean or not mean? Because like I said, you can't achieve a 5.0 here. You can at some of the neighbors.
I was gonna say, most businesses probably wouldn't even know that's a thing. I've never even heard of a
Right.
5.0.
Yeah.
I would assume everything would be on a 4.0 scale, so.
Yeah, I think if you're going right into that world of work, they're generally looking for that you achieved your diploma, and then a lot of our kids are leaving with some industry certifications that they can add to their resumes, and they certainly do college career planning. So they're walking out with interview experience, resumes that are built, that go beyond, like you said, it's maybe a little bit less around those factors. There's another rights piece in there around records in those pieces, and that's required. So again, there's some rights around what you're allowing your child to be instructed in. There's some rights around different records around your child. They're different academic records. But again, I would dig in sooner rather than later on 340 so that you can kind of think about, and I've been mapping, like I said, communication that we received throughout, and that's why I can call out those very specific examples of chords, of this, of that, because I track all of that. The next piece is around extended instructional programs. So it's your field trips, your extended. This is why I know that I have to have board authorization if I'm going out of state, if I'm staying overnight, if I'm doing things. And it's also inclusive of volunteers who might serve in the classroom and their role in extending or enriching an instructional program. That's why it sits here and not kind of in an operational, because it's speaking to how might they be in the classroom and help. And volunteers are different than visitors. So that's why there is a separate piece. A visitor is someone, you might be a visitor, right, to your child's classroom, but a volunteer may be serving in a different way. They have different background check parameters, all of that, and what we would allow or not allow. I'm not going to defer my instructional responsibilities to a volunteer. Would I allow volunteers to come in and read with kids and do all that and work under that direction? Absolutely. So it's really delineating, but that's the why this one sits in here. Any questions on that one? And again, I think we've cleaned up a little less on the policy language, but more on the process end, where we're batching those, we're calling for those so that you as board kind of see those in fall. What are those, you know, kind of out of state trips and all of that. So that's helped. But if there's, again, if other process pieces come to mind, like that cleanup as we go, that's welcome information and feedback too. Here's your next big bucket. Okay, and you guys have had a lot of work around this one. It's probably your favorite, right? It's all around instructional resources and services. This is what you can use with kids and your role in approving that, okay? These were all the things around what is a full class, right? What's like everyone's using, what's a selected resource, what's a supplementary resource, what's something I'm exposing, here's where book clubs came in, kind of all those pieces, laying out what are all the types of resources that might be used in our classrooms, and what is that different chain of authority and review. So we'll have to go back and just take a look as we've kind of worked through. We always said that one was, you know, Chris's favorite word is iterative on policy. You know, as you've used that, what do we need to tighten up in some spots in those pieces? So taking a look at that. Library is separate than in there we have material selection and reconsideration. I think we might want to consider breaking those apart in some way. I think the policy language is fine, but it's commingled. I remember when we didn't want to confuse public when we were going through it. But we might want to look at that piece. We called out reconsideration more clearly in the title, but we might want to look at, is there a way to separate that? Because how we select material and then the act of reconsidering materials is two wildly different things to me and process, so. And then the other is library media services, interlibrary. You just saw that library plan that's required that you authorize, those things connected to our libraries. On that, we need to update our instructional technology pieces. Those are just a little old. We need to deal with AI, and that needs to be reflected in our policies and practice, that we're at least aware of it. There's no mention of it in our current policy, and how we're going to teach kids responsible use of the tools that are now surrounding them in that. So when I looked at that, that needed some updating as well. And then separate from that is just the protection of the instructional environment from cell phones. You saw that the state passed some pieces of legislation around that. We currently don't allow use of cell phones in the instructional environment. So it doesn't necessarily sit in this piece, but we'll clean that up. They will require a policy specifically. We're already in compliance with it, so. Guidance and counseling, you've heard that they're undergoing an entire program evaluation. This is some standard language around that you provide a program so that kids have access to guidance and counseling services. That's all the academic and career planning. Sometimes we just think about guidance and counseling being just that social emotional part, and it's not. All the academic and career planning is under that domain, all of those pieces. So it'll be exciting as they undergo that program review, how they kind of fold in, you know, here's our base policy, what's our practice, and how they maybe bring some recommendations forward. So I'm excited about that. I was just talking to Adrian the other day, I was just talking about updating the response to intervention manuals. We have a whole guide on that, but that's where we're talking about some of those pieces around interventions. We don't even address it under there. We have research under here. We don't have any mention of intervention at all in this section. So I think that's not only an alignment issue, but there should be something around that. There's a lot of pieces, especially in, you know, some of those components of Act 20, some of those other things around our obligation to intervene. And there's certainly a piece of that prior to doing a identification of a student with a disability that we've had to show evidence of an intervention. And it's just not reflected here at all. So this kind of this big meaty one and that other one is where, as committee members, I'd like you to focus your time in kind of doing that close read of those and think about kind of the decisions you need to make as board members. And, you know, is this the right foundation to be laid? Is there something missing in those? What does that really look like? And again, we'll still be running those other committees too, because they, you know, they're the end users of that, but that's where I really want you to put a lot of your time and attention. This, to me, is around extracurricular activities and programs, not really the meat of your work. But just so you're aware, we've been working with the athletic directors to update some of their procedural manuals, their code of conduct, all of that. That'll go straight into policy when they're ready, and then come back out to you as full board members, but it's nothing that your committee needs to attend to at this time. But just wanted you to know that that part was worked on too. And then we just have a miscellaneous one. The 380 is literally called the miscellaneous instructional policies one. And that is where we have controversial issues. That might be nested better somewhere else, so it's not just sitting there. But this is really talking about what we teach and how we teach it. And the fact that anything could be considered controversial by anyone, right? Where that line is, lies with individuals, with families, that could be different. So it really spells out how we engage in thoughtful conversation if something comes up that's considered controversial in a topic. So I'd spend some time going through that as well. Again, I'm going to lean on the fact that we are communicating what our standards are, what our curriculum are, what are the resources we use. So there isn't that kind of guesswork for a family, but they can certainly look at pieces and say, you know what, I don't want that. There's a lot of checks and balances throughout here where parents have that decision-making authority around stepping out of any lesson, any piece. So just take a double check on that, because that's where we might field complaints, right? But again, helping families understand, like at any point you could step out of a topic too on something, but I would spend some time looking at that. Any questions on any of those pieces? That's really your big bucket. You saw those big meaty sections around your entire work, which is to vet curriculum, have a process around that, make recommendations to your board member colleagues around resources, curricular, all of those, what your instructional program looks like, sounds like, feels like, what your expectations are around that. That sits here foundationally. You guys have some homework to do, but you have quite a few months ahead of you to do it. Any questions around kind of process, timeline, next steps for you as a committee?
What format would you like that in? So as I'm going through these policies, I'm thinking that I would take a look at, is this needed as a policy? Where else may it be applicable? And then recommend getting rid of the policy or updates to the policy as it stands. So is that going to look like a form of spreadsheet sent to you, to Melanie?
You know what? If you would like us to, I can put together a template for you if that's a little bit easier. But otherwise, whatever really works for you, we're willing to take that. If you want, like, hey, Jen, give me these printed and I want to do a markup on them, or I want to just give you a running list of thoughts, or I want to do a follow-up conversation to dig through some things, because I'm well-versed in all the other buckets of policy too. We can certainly do that. We can work with Kelly around your readiness to do a deep dive. Maybe those two big meaty sections next, give you some time to look at it. I can synthesize all your thoughts and then bring you back kind of, hey, here's what you guys were thinking, and we can have an open dialogue around that again. So like I said, you've got a lot of months, so it's kind of saying, all right, what chunk do we want to take when, and when you're ready to talk about it as a committee. And we'll start engaging kids, so if we wait just a little bit, the kids, we might be able to bring their perspective to the table for that follow-up dialogue, so that you can see where are you thinking as members of the committee versus where are students who are kind of living with those, what do they feel? Sound like a path?
Sounds good.
Enjoy your homework.
All right, thank you.
I love policy, so.
All right, the next item up for discussion today is the elementary strategic group update, and it looks like Kelly Downs will be presenting that.
Thank you.
Well, first, I apologize for my voice. I hope it still makes it clear for you, even with this. Thank you for your time tonight as well. I'm excited to bring this information to you. I don't know if you remember a little bit back in the spring, we talked about how this was going to be started, and we were able to put it in place. And I'm excited to tell you about where it's landed so far. A little bit of background, how this started. Our current state, looking at our current state, we've had declining math proficiency rates. It's evidenced by our universal screener, our STAR, and our forward exam, and that really highlighted a critical need. We needed to do something in our elementary schools. Our STAR scores average proficiency for K-5 dropped by 11 points from spring of 2024 to spring of 2025. Some of that could be accounted for with the adoption of CKLA, where teachers were just so focused on, literacy that they kind of let math slide a little bit. That's some of it, but even without that, our baseline just hasn't been moving forward enough. My eye is always on that 80 percentile. We need to get 80 percentile of our kids to be proficient to know that our universal instruction is solid and is working, and we have not moved that needle well enough. Our math scores on forward for 3rd and 5th graders averaged a 5-point decrease from spring of '23 to spring of '24. And while we do have a high-quality curriculum, it is dated. It goes back to 2016. It was one of the best of its time. It's still very well regarded. Our teachers are lacking the experience that they need to utilize formative instruction, to use that data to deliver very targeted small group math instruction. And we know that small group math instruction is critical in supporting a universal instruction. So in the spring, I went to a math conference with all of this in my mind, looking at this, and attended a presentation by Elmbrook School District. And they have developed a small group framework. So there's small groups, and you can pull a bunch of kids and do something with them, but what do you exactly do with them? And what you're doing with them can be okay, or it can be exceptionally in moving the target. So they developed a framework that has 7 components to it, and it's based on Young's brain research and Hattie's meta-analysis. So a man named Young has done a lot of brain research about how do we learn? How do kids learn? How do you get it to stick? And when I look at our scores from like that natural drop from spring to fall, part of that's retention. We're not holding on to what we need, right? And his research is about how do we connect that learning so that it stays and we can grow it. And then you have Hattie's research. Hattie is well known in educational circles. His name is John Hattie. And what he has done is taken a look at all of the research that's out there, like a meta-analysis of what exists in the research on education about what works and what doesn't work. So there's so many things we can do, right? But some things have more of an effect than other things. And we want to direct our attention and our efforts, knowing that effort and time is limited, to those things that have the largest effect on student learning. And that's where his study has come down to. So they've developed a framework, taking those two things, putting them together to go, okay, we're going to meet in small groups. How can we ramp up what's actually happening in those small groups? Their results were very impressive. They had a 90% improvement for those who participated in the strategic groups on post-assessments. They tracked a standard. They said, okay, we're teaching on the standard. 90% of the kids were proficient afterwards. That was an enormous number to me. They had improvement in their math proficiency from 4th to 6th out of K-8 benchmark districts in 2025. So they grew 2 different points in that. They had a rise, and this one really hit for me too, knowing what our scores are like. And students who received special ed instruction, they had achievement on 4 that grew 8 points after doing this. And they have, after putting this as part of their strategic plan for the district, they used this as one of their action steps. And when they did that, they moved their district, or in some of the schools, from exceeding to significantly exceeds expectations. So I was looking at their data going, all right, I need to know more about this. And they are incredibly gracious and really want to share this. They have taken this framework that they've been working with now, and they are creating a book with it in a handbook. And so Elmbrook has really supported the women who have created this, who are instructional coaches, teaching and learning specialists, and are supporting them in coming to places like West Bend to share this so that all kids can benefit. So from there, we developed the Elementary Strategic Group Initiative in partnership with Elmbrook, CESA 6, and funded in part by a Kepner grant. So I applied for a grant to help support when our teachers had to be moved from the classroom, that we could pay for those subs. The long-term goal, this is what we're hoping over time, is to help every K-5 student achieve math proficiency by strengthening daily small group targeted instruction. So that's long-term. We want to see this in every classroom. We want all of our teachers doing this. In order to do that, we started with a small group of teachers, and these were all volunteers. Our goal was to get 2 in each building, with the idea of down the road with reconfiguration. They will have more in each one of those elementary buildings, and then they would have each other to collaborate with within the building. So it was very strategic in that regard. And these teacher representatives, what they are doing, they needed to participate in the initial training. And this was amazing because we originally started this idea with asking Elmbrook, can we just come see? Can we visit you? And they're like, sure, of course. And as we started talking further, they're like, you know, we can do a virtual visit and kind of train your teachers virtually. And by the end of it, they're like, we'll just come to you. We'll just come and do it. So it was fabulous. So they came here to do our initial training. This is what the teachers needed to do. They welcomed a site visit, and we wanted our teacher also to be involved in any follow-up conversations that we had. They signed up to participate in individual coaching from CESA 6. We knew that we couldn't just have a couple things and say, go do. We wanted it to have continual support. So Sarah Fleischman from CESA 6 is doing individual coaching sessions with the teachers. We've told them they're expected to at least do one, but from there they can access her as much as they want and need to go from there. They are attending the visit to Brook School District to observe their successful small group structures, and then just to take a step and implement as much as they can. So the teachers have been told, please have grace on yourself. This is a lot to do, but they are trying to do those frameworks as much as they can. Our teachers so far have really risen to the occasion. Literally on the day after our training, people were putting it in place and taking steps. We also want them to use the formative data. This is such a critical piece, and it's a bit of a shift for some of our teachers. We've had a lot of conversation around our summative pieces, and those are important. Our universal screeners are important. But that formative data that we do, I taught something today, did you learn it? Is so critical, because that's where we interfere or intervene and go, you didn't, we don't want you to fall behind. We're going to get you right now, make sure you understand it so you're ready for tomorrow and we have something to build on. So this is such a critical piece and where we need to strengthen it. So these groups that these teachers are running are going to be based off of that formative assessment. And we wanted them also, their expectation was this, share your learning. Go to your PLCs, talk about what you're learning, and be willing to have teachers come into your classroom once you get comfortable. But give them a little time and have them come in. And so far, they've been great about that. The outcomes we're aiming for this particular year. We were hoping to see a 10% proficiency growth in STAR and forward assessment on the students that they're intervening with. Teachers haven't started completely tracking yet. We just wanted them to get used to the framework first, but that will be moving more into the spring where, okay, let's take a look at some targeted kids and how they're doing. And we want their confidence and expertise in data-driven math instruction to improve. It's difficult to say, we have a classroom of kids, I find the formative, they're not understanding what we're teaching. Now what? We want our teachers to feel very confident in how they approach that. And then system-wide, we're hoping that the next step with this is these become type of anchor classrooms, that we then broaden this training to more people. How that looks is not laid out very intentionally, actually, at this time, because I need this group of teachers to be, their voices involved in what that looks like. I want to make sure they're comfortable with whatever it is we decide and that their place in it is honored. So that will be designed with that team. I mentioned Hattie's effect size, and I want to show you this small group. This is his barometer. There are many, many, many more things that he's looked into, but this hits some of the highlights of them. And the main number that is important is that 0.4, the 4/10 there. That number is what he calls like the leverage point, the effect size, right? Any effect size greater than 0.4 has been shown to accelerate learning. Things that are less than 0.4, you can see, don't have as much of an effect and can actually harm, have reverse effects on a student's learning. Small group instruction falls at 0.47, which is accelerating learning. But as I said, Elmbrook was like, that's great, but can we make it more based on what we know? So they took Young's work, and this is one of the key ideas of the work that they worked with, that the single most important factor in learning is the existing networks of neurons in the learner's brain already. They ascertain what they are and teach accordingly. So what our teachers, as part of this framework, is connecting to what kids know and creating a connection. So the synapses connect neurons to other neurons. Neurons don't exist in isolation, and to create new learning, the teacher has to connect those learning to something concrete. The people from Elmbrook did a really nice job of emphasizing how we can't connect an idea, a new idea, to fragile learning, because it doesn't stick. Fragile learning might be like, yesterday you learned this. Well, that was just yesterday. I've just started learning it. If I'm going to try to build on that, that's going to collapse. So we did a lot of work with learning one of the key points of this brain research in the component of connecting it to something that you can really relate to. Even if we have to build it ourselves. Like if we take manipulatives and we do an example, now you've experienced this, now we can connect. So there's lots of ways to do that, even if it's from their regular life, whether it's holidays or playing in the snow or whatever they can connect to, they try to do that now. These are the 7 components. But if you look on the right-hand side, the numbers you're seeing there are all Hattie's effect sizes. So you can see they've taken that small group and with these 7 components, amped it up by using things we know work to amp up learning. Clear goals, appropriately challenging goals. Look at those effect sizes. Again, 0.4 is the number that we have to be above. But look at number 2, activating prior knowledge. That connecting to something they already know, which is reflective of Young's research, 0.98. Explicit vocabulary instruction. So we're bringing that into what they're doing in their small groups. Some direct instruction of modeling what it is first and then keeping that model out while kids try it themselves. Scaffolding little bits and pieces and building on it. That rehearsal where students get to apply independently and then they do transfer strategies, 0.86. Finally, they move into evaluation and reflection, a discussion, questioning, and deliberate practice. And usually that practice takes place in front of the teacher. Try this out now. When they see they try it out, they can send them back to their seats. So it's very fluid. These groups are 10 to 15 minutes long. This is all very quick, right? And they don't have to be necessarily in this order. So our teachers are learning how to put all of this into their small groups. So October 21st, we had our initial training where Julie Wessel and Michelle Malinan of Elmbrook School District, who are the authors of this, came to meet our teachers. The teachers are listed on the side, and I can't say enough about this group. They are all in, and they are stepping up to the challenge and have been great to work with. You can see also a picture in here of Sarah Fleischman. She joined us on this initial day to make sure she had the same understanding and her support of our teachers. That was a full day. It was training, and then the teachers also had time with them there to start trying and planning. They shared templates with them for the ways they can plan their small groups. And again, I want to emphasize this isn't the easiest thing in the world to put in place. When you look at, this was from the training that day, the list of questions are the questions our teachers had when they initially started thinking about doing it. And you can see, like, what do you do with the rest of the class? How many kids are in the group? Just some basics about managing this in order to do it on an everyday basis. So this was all addressed for our teachers by Elmbrook through the visits and also with Sarah's support. On November 19th, we did the site visit. And these pictures kind of go in a rotation. That first one, we started by going in and observing a classroom and just seeing it. We had the components in front of us so teachers could kind of point out what those were. We debriefed then. We went back into another classroom and did the same thing again. We were at 2 different schools. We then joined together, our whole group, because we were divided up, and the principal came and presented what had been his experience with this and how it had impacted the entire district from that strategic action. And then finally, our teachers came back here to work. That day was interesting. I had a meeting I had to leave for. Heather Gelnick took over. When I came back in here, everybody was still here. They only had 10 minutes left. I thought some people may have started like packing up. It was silent. They were completely engrossed in preparing their work. So it was very impressive. And then the following day, November 20th, we trained administrators. It's so critical that the administrators understand what this is. I think it's a very easy thing to go, oh, small group, just pull kids. That's not what this is. This is taking it to another level. So we shared the framework. Elmbrook came out again to meet with them. They identified the components of systemic and transformational change. Like, what do we need to do now to bring this broader? What is their role in getting this spread to other teachers. And then we identified supports for teachers. It's things as simple as making sure they have what they need. Like, do they need erasers for whiteboards? Do they have, getting what they need to support them in what they're doing. And then from there, we observed Silverbrook's classroom. Now, I know Lance and Heather Gelnick had been working a lot on bringing small groups in. So they're like in their 4th year, I believe, of doing type of small group work. So they already had a lot of the foundations laid. So we wanted to start there with administrators seeing it. And Leah Miller and Matt Muehlbauer invited us into their classroom. You can imagine what that was like with all these administrators and myself and Julie and Michelle. It was a lot of people in a classroom. So kudos to them for inviting us in. And they did a fabulous job. They're really well on their way. And then we observed classrooms at McLean. We saw Laura Kusick. Again, you can see she had a lot of people in the room. And Erin Kiesau. They've all stepped up and have really, they're just doing a really nice start to this already. Then we came back and we debriefed as a group with the teaching and learning specialists and with the principals and myself to just answer questions and how we can support them in supporting teachers. And then next steps. From here on, teachers will be utilizing those coaching sessions that we talked about with Sarah Fleischman. Again, we said minimum of 1, but they can reach out a whole lot more than that if they want. We want them to share their learning in their PLCs. We want to start moving into videotaping them so that we can have our library. Elmbrook has built their own library of teacher videos because it's more powerful as we want to expand this for our teachers to see our teachers doing something. So we want to get that going. We want the principals to continue that intentional support, being very aware of how they're doing that. And we want to create a vehicle for whole group collaboration. I want to create some kind of, I don't know if it's a chat group or whatever, of these teachers so that they can regularly reach out to each other on a basis as they're trying to put this in place. And then we need to plan for next year's rollout. Again, to me, the key point is making sure their voices are involved in how we do this. Elmbrook has offered what they did in their 3 years, and I'm sure we'll start with a similar format. But I'll bring that to this group, and we'll see what we want to adjust. So that's everything. Thanks for listening to all of that. Do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you for your presentation. I think it sounds really exciting, and I can tell you're excited too. And I'm looking forward to seeing, how this gets implemented and the results, the kids with the grades improving and whatnot. So
I hope so.
it sounds exciting. I like it.
I just also want to give another shout out to those women from Elmbrook. They've just really gone about, and it's the district too, because they've supported them in doing this. And their whole thing was, if it can help kids, let's just get more kids, helping more kids. So that was fantastic, and I'm really appreciative of all they've given us voluntarily. So
I love that. It seems like a great opportunity that they were able to work with you, or
yes,
with the districts working together. That's good.
yes.
Thank you.
yes.
All right, then we'll move on to the next, our last discussion item, which is the book club permission form parent survey results. And Erin Faust will be presenting this.
Thank you.
All right, hello, everybody. Adrienne prepared this, but Adrienne is out working with our 610 Language Arts team tonight to start their resource review process, so I am presenting on her behalf. So we've been working on permission forms for book clubs for several years now. We've been through several iterations of the letter that goes home with the permission form, always working to be as clear and as transparent as possible with parents and guardians about what their options are, what the books are, and how they can grant permission for that. So at the end of Q4 last year, we received feedback from families and students and community members, and then over the summer made some edits to the information letter to make it more clear and transparent. And then during the week of October 27th, we sent out a survey to the 4 grade level classes that had participated in book club during Q1 with the new updated letter. And we asked several questions of the families that responded. So of the families, we sent out to 7th grade, 8th grade, and Honors English 1 and Honors English 2, which is a group of 9th graders and typically a group of 10th graders. 151 families responded to the survey. And then I'll just go through the questions and the outcomes with you. So of the students and families that participated, the majority of the responses came from our middle school students, with 47% coming from our 7th grade families, 25% coming from our 8th grade families. Our Honors English 1 and Honors English 2 classes only run 1 to 2 sections a semester. So it makes sense that that response rate is a little bit smaller in the big picture of the puzzle. So then the first question we asked was, compared to the previous permission slip letter, how clear is the information on the current permission slip? 54% of our respondents said it was much clearer, and then 46% said it was about the same. 0% said that it was less clear. So we feel really confident that the information that we are sharing is being understood by families. The next question we asked was, do you feel the current permission slip provides enough information to help you make an informed choice about your child's book club selection? 83% of our respondents said yes, definitely. An additional 13.2% said yes, somewhat. And only 3% said either they weren't sure or that they needed more information. So again, we take that data and we say the majority of our families feel like they have the information they need to make informed decisions about book selections. The last question we asked was simply compare the two versions. Did you prefer last year's version? Do you prefer this year's updated version? 48% said that they preferred this year's version, 1% preferred last year's version, and 51% just prefer a version and appreciate that they're getting information. We'll go with that. We did have a spot for families to provide just additional information. So Adrian provided a summary of sort of those themes that came through from the additional comments. Really, we saw that there was a high trust in our teachers that was dominating the feedback. Many families communicated that they felt the permission slips were redundant, which is good because it tells us that we're being transparent, that families are getting what they need from the teachers and from the district. A lot of families appreciated that the revised form was clear and it's easy to use and it's quick to provide information and that permission. There was a small minority that was concerned about content appropriateness, which we see in the results and is the reason that we have permission slips, so that those who have questions and concerns are able to have them addressed for their students. There was a desire for a simplified opt-out or to select any book, so we can continue to look into how we can provide that opportunity. And then parents, again, value that transparency in the book selection, and then just overwhelming gratitude and praise for our teachers. It was widespread throughout the comments for the work they put in to select the books, to vet the books, and to communicate this information out. So that's really just an update. We are going to then continue moving forward using the updated permission slip and information letter that was drafted. We shared that at an earlier meeting this year, but we're just going to continue with that based on this feedback. Questions?
I don't really have any questions. It looks like the feedback that you got was pretty good for the form, so makes sense to keep using it.
It's great feedback, and it makes all the work that everyone does like so worth it when you're getting the feedback. Be like, oh, people like this. They want to do this. So it's very exciting. So great job.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. All right, well, we have reached the end of our agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. It is 5:38 p.m. Thank you, everyone.